So let's bring in Ohio Republican Congressman Jim Jordan. He is chair of the Judiciary Committee, also sits on the Oversight Committee. He's been very active lately. We saw yesterday with the Merrick Garland testimony. That was quite an interesting day. But I do want to get your take on what we're seeing here, Congressman Jordan.
Yeah.
And, you know, what kind of country doesn't have a border across its southern side? I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. And the White House seems to be annoyed that anyone's even asking questions about it.
What kind of country doesn't have a border? A country run by Joe Biden. Understand, this is intentional, and it's not just higher numbers now, as Mr. Kirby talked. It's been high numbers for 2.5 years.
Millions.
Record numbers, month after month, year after year. It's intentional. They made a decision on day one. They said, we will no longer build the wall. We will get rid of the Remain in Mexico policy, and when you come to the border, you will be released. No detention, no detaining people, no waiting to find out if they're legitimate asylum seekers. You will be released. And so the whole world hears that, and who wouldn't want to come to the greatest country ever? But this is intentional, and more importantly, it's wrong, and everyone knows it, including the Democrat mayor of New York, who spoke out against it 2 weeks ago. But somehow Karine Jean-Pierre and Joe Biden don't seem to care, which is really troubling when the commander-in-chief of the greatest country ever has that attitude and has intentionally done this to our country.
So they're blaming you and your colleagues. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre explaining that it's the GOP undoing that has led to what's going on the border. Watch.
We're going to continue to implement a strategy that is humane, that is safe, and that is orderly as it relates to enforcement. And so that is a promise that you can see from this president. Again, GOP, the Republicans, put out a continuing resolution that actually reverses the work that the president is trying to do.
Can you explain that?
No, we passed the strongest immigration enforcement legislation ever. It sits in the United States Senate. Chuck Schumer won't let it come up for a vote. And Joe Biden said even if he did and they pass it, he would veto it. That's the problem. We want to put back in the policies that were working 3 years ago under President Trump's administration. For them to say that is ridiculous. Maybe that I do know they always want more money, but I think they want more money so they can process people faster, not to secure the border, not to stop the migration that's coming in, but to speed up the process.
Well,
have more
that's
agents.
exactly.
That's which is so that would just make the problem even worse.
Yeah, it's interesting what she says, because she says to implement a strategy that is humane, safe, and orderly. You know, it actually looks fairly orderly. I mean, there's 10,000 people. These poor Border Patrol officials. They have more people than they can possibly handle. They're trying to do it in the most humane way possible, but that isn't what is upsetting people. What's upsetting people is the numbers of people that are sleeping on the streets outside the Roosevelt Hotel and places like it all across the country. Elon Musk has noticed this, and he tweeted about it today. He said, strange that there's almost no legacy media coverage of this. About 2 million people from every country on Earth are entering the United States southern border every year. That's just, the number is rising rapidly, yet no preventative action is taken by the current administration, he says. And I've noted that, you know, some new voices are popping up in the White House press briefings that we haven't heard from before on this issue. So I think that the rest of the media is starting to wake up to this.
They're starting to wake up to it because it's coming everywhere. Every town, every city, every community is seeing it because the volume, the number is so darn high, including, as I said earlier, the mayor of New York City, who's not a conservative Republican. He just sees what's happening to that great city, sees all the people coming and how they can't handle it, the tax base can't handle it. But Joe Biden doesn't seem to care. Karine Jean-Pierre doesn't seem to care. And I know Secretary Mayorkas doesn't care because we've asked him tons of questions, asked for information and data that he refuses to get to. So this is the state of this administration. And it's frankly why I think the approval ratings of Joe Biden are so darn low, because they see what a pathetic job this administration has done.
You know, I just want to ask you one quick question about Merrick Garland and a point that you brought up last night. I think you were on Hannity talking to Sean last night about this. And it goes to this question of what difference it made when Merrick Garland allowed Weiss to become the special counsel. You know, why did Weiss need that authority, as you were talking about, and something that I was talking to someone about yesterday afternoon? That wasn't really made clear. That question was not clearly asked yesterday during that hearing. Why not?
Well, what I said to him is, if he already had the authority, why does he need the authority? Because they said all along he had to ultimately. In fact, the Attorney General said to Senator Grassley in a Senate hearing on March 1st of this year that David Weiss has complete authority to bring charges in any jurisdiction he wants. Well, when he made that statement, the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia had already said, no, you can't bring charges in D.C. So both can't be true, but they try to play this nuanced game where, all he had to do was come ask me. I would give him the authority. He knew he had it all the time, even though he didn't, but he knew he could always ask me. What is that doublespeak from the Attorney General of the United States? That is a problem and a host of other things with the way this investigation was run.
So is he off the hook for those answers at this point? I mean, what happens now? We all watch these hearings and people get riled up about it, but there isn't a lot of accountability from him, and he didn't even know if people were fired to do with the FBI memo on Catholic radicals that needed to be rooted out. So what happens now is my question.
Well, Martha, he didn't even know that the statute of limitations had run for the most serious tax crimes.
Do you believe that? Do you believe he really didn't know that the statute of limitations was running out on those tax issues for Hunter Biden?
This is an investigation of the son of the President of the United States, and you don't know that fact? Give me a break. And if you didn't know, holy cow, who's running the Justice Department? So this is the problem. What's next is David Weiss is scheduled to be in front of our committee on October 18th. Next week, we're going to, Chairman Comer has announced a hearing where we're looking into how this impeachment inquiry unfolds in the House of Representatives. So we're going to keep doing our work, our constitutional duty to do oversight of the executive branch, and we're now in an impeachment inquiry phase of that investigation.
One more question for you, and then we're going to go to our panel. The last time that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, came to Washington, he spoke before a joint session of Congress. Everyone stood and applauded. There was a lot of discussion about the fight that he is taking to Vladimir Putin. And he says, so that other countries in NATO don't have to. He's getting a bit of a different response from your party this time around. This is the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. This is what he sounds like now on this. Watch.
I think a lot of people have a question is, what's the strategy to win? Accountability, they want to make sure the resources are going to the right place.
He also said something like, was Zelensky elected to Congress when asked why he wasn't going to speak before the joint session? And what is the plan for victory? So why the change in tone at this point?
Well, because even when he was here a year ago and spoke to Congress, even then and now, no one can tell us what the objective is. So it's not just what's a strategy to win. As the Speaker said, I think he's right about that. It's how do you define winning? Nobody can tell us what the goal is. Is the goal to get the Russians out of eastern Ukraine? Is the goal to get the Russians out of Crimea since they've had since 2014?
Would say yes, Chairman Jordan. He would say yes. We're going all the way to Crimea and out of Donetsk and Luhansk, everything.
Well, but Zelensky doesn't get to define how American tax dollars are spent, and that's the fundamental question. So President Biden hasn't told us what the goal is. Tony Blinken hasn't told us what the goal is. No Democrat seems to be able to tell us what the goal is, and the Republicans who support it, they don't seem to be able to tell me what's the objective. And until you know the objective, why should we continue to send the hard-earned tax money of the American people over there? So that to answer that fundamental, that's why I voted against so many of these pieces of legislation that have come up relative to Ukraine, because no one can answer the fundamental question.
Okay. Thank you for your answers to those. Congressman Jordan, Chairman Jordan, good to have you with us as always. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.